Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. If you are writing with me and wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video and in the description below. I'm looking forward to reading your chapters. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is PG-13, so if you're under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last two stories we heard. The title of this story is Elloni's Pride, and today we are reading chapter 18 out of book 1. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated earlier and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you are specific. Now let's start. Elloni's Pride, Book 1, Breaking Point. This is Chapter 18, Deciding. Excuse me. Trenton was with a small group of children and his brother Moloch. They went to the pond south of the village to get some water. The river ran through the pond, so some called it the river, but the water spread out into the grasses and was very still like a pond in the north part of it. Trenton was enjoying the gentle breeze, and he was glad that his pa let him leave the cellar to get water for everyone. And by watching the little children, he knew they enjoyed the time outside too. To Trenton, it was awful down in the cellar. Yes, they needed shelter from the rain, but the odor was near unbearable, and the air was stagnant. Although stagnant wasn't a word Trenton knew, he only knew the air just hung there and didn't move. Trenton knew they didn't come out to play, and mostly they didn't know what playing was, but they were there to get water and get straight back. So while Trenton didn't play, he did walk leisurely to the pond, which allowed the smaller children to keep up. They each had a water sack to fill, and the older children automatically helped the younger ones. When they finished getting water and turned back, Trenton saw dragons in the sky. So he told the children to squat down in the grass and to wait. Trenton's heart beat hard in his chest. He knew the soldiers would count, and they wouldn't find everyone, so they would just start killing people. He looked around at the children with him. He had Moloch and his 3 younger siblings, and he had several other little ones and a couple of older children from the other families, so that the group was 15. He knew he couldn't protect them all, but he didn't want to go back to the village. He glanced back over his shoulder for a few moments as he thought. He looked at Moloch and whispered, "We need to get across the water." A young girl near said, "The dragons can fly across the water." Trenton looked at her. "Yes, they can. But if we go back, they will kill us. Do you want them to kill Trissy?" He motioned to the girl's younger sister. The girl looked at her sister and shook her head sadly. "Then get her and go across the water. If you stay near the right edge, on the wide part, it doesn't get too deep," stated Trenton. The girl wasn't sure, but she saw King Damontade's soldiers landing all around the village, and her memories of their last visit were strong. She gathered up Trissy and cautiously headed into the water. Trenton tapped the shoulder of a boy about 9 years old. and motioned to him to get his 4-year-old sister, and then he motioned towards Tressa, who was already in the water with Trissy. Just as they looked, Trissy was pulling her legs up and letting out a squeal because the water was cold. Tressa quickly put her hand on Trissy's mouth, and all of the older children looked north. It seemed time froze, along with their hearts. Trenton motioned Tressa on, and then he motioned with his head to the next boy. He whispered to Moloch, "Get Bulso. Hold his hand in case he falls, and I'll carry Cartman. Jovel will have to walk, but I'll hold her hand. You go next." Moloch nodded. He gathered Bulso's hand and started walking into the water behind Gultor, the 9-year-old boy who Trenton had motioned to go next. Gultor had his sister Biny. The noise from the soldiers' activities echoed down to them, and the group of older children could imagine what was happening. They were all scared. They didn't want to die, and didn't have any hope to help their parents. Aldemia already gathered her sister Talta, and she had Kinsesni's, her other sister's, hand. She looked at Trenton, and he nodded. She headed into the water, as she whispered to her sisters some words to keep the sisters calm as they entered. Trenton whispered to the last 3 besides his siblings to hold hands and follow the other children. Then he lifted up Cartman and took Jovel's hand. He kept his eyes north for a bit longer before he turned to head into the pond. As Trenton headed into the pond, he saw some movement to his left, which made his heart jump. He turned quickly and stared. Something was coming at him fast. But he quickly realized it was more children. Another group of children from a different cellar in the village was also going to the pond to get water. When the older children saw Trenton's group start going across, they decided to send the younger ones. They watched north as the little ones ran, and then they ran in a squat behind them. Trenton motioned them on, and he watched north as the older children caught up to the younger ones, and the older siblings automatically helped the younger ones. An older girl paused. She already picked up her sister, but a 5-year-old boy didn't have anyone older to help him, since he was an only child. The girl held out her hand for the boy, and Trenton whispered, "Stay to the right, and it won't get too deep." She nodded and headed into the pond after the other children. Trenton thought of his group of 15, and now 9 more made 24. He looked around to see if he could see anyone else, but he didn't. He looked north once more and thought to himself, "Bye, Ma. Bye, Pa. Bye, Grandpa. We're sorry to leave you, but we don't want to die too. Other people left, so there must be a way." He turned back towards the children with a heavy heart from leaving the rest of his family, with a tear at the corner of his eye. But he knew he had to help his brothers and sister and the other children to survive without the village and away from the soldiers. The wind blew his tear away, and he headed into the pond. A few places were slippery, and it did get too deep for the smaller children at the edge where the river flowed in. Bulso was tall enough, but Moloch waded back in and took Trissy from Trassa. Then Moloch waded back in again and lifted up Biny. Martin, who had been in their original group, turned back and lifted up Kaiser, who was the only child. And Clary, who had been in the original group, lifted up Jovel. Then Trenton went back and helped Aldemnia with Kinsesi. After they crossed, they turned back and looked north towards their village, and they saw thick plumes of smoke. Hector jumped when he heard a noise outside. That would be the children returning. He motioned to two boys who were still with them. "You two go down the long tunnel and tell Trenton not to return yet. Go!" The boys looked at their parents, and the father nodded his head, so the boys took off running. "What about my children?" asked Kimley. "They need to leave too. Maybe they could find Kala out there." Hector just glanced over as they heard another noise. "I'm going to get closer to the entrance and see if I can make out anything." Shireman stood up and lifted his son and daughter into his arms. I'll make sure they get out. He glanced at the other parents. I'll make sure they all get out. Then Shireman walked out of the chamber and down the tunnel. He knew he was leaving his wife, and he knew she would not leave her mother. Shireman, called Kimley, are you coming back? Shireman let out a sigh. He leaned his head back into the chamber. The children need me to look after them. You can come, or you can stay and die with your mother. He turned and walked down the long tunnel. Hector stopped heading to the entrance into where the house used to be, and he turned back. Wait for me, he called, and he ran to catch Shireman. He briefly stopped at the doorway to the chamber. Go, said Kimley's mother. Go be with your husband and your children. I can't leave you, stated Kimley. Then you will die with me, like your husband said. Hector looked at his wife and Pa. Come on, let's go find Trenton. At that moment they heard the roaring of dragons outside. We're going to die if we go out there, stated Kimley. Hector's wife tried to shrink into her corner, and Hector's Pa said, Go, son, help your children. I'll only slow you down. Hector glanced around once more, and then he headed down the tunnel. Trissy's and Trosta's parents got up and followed them, as did Aldemia's mother. The rest were too scared to leave and felt a greater chance of dying by leaving. The ones that stayed extinguished the lanterns and huddled in the corners. Trenton glanced around his group and counted heads. He received, Trenton, this is Kosher. Are you still in the cellar in the village? Trenton glanced around and thought, No, I'm not in the cellar. Oh, good. I'm glad your family decided to leave and not stay. Wait, who are you? You said Kosher? Yes, I'm Kosher. How are you in my head? Where are you? I need help. I have 23, 24 in my group, and I'm the oldest. Where are you? We left the night the soldiers burned the village, and we've been walking away ever since. We've found berries and wild lettuce to eat. I learned a charm, and I cast the charm on you. Bradley tried to talk to your pa to get him to leave. But if you're the oldest, then your pa isn't with you. No, we left this morning to get water at the pond, and then the dragons came. We knew that we would die if we went back, so we crossed the pond. Don't go straight. We turned in the water so the dogs would lose our scent. We're out of the water, thought Trenton. He glanced around his group and motioned to them to start moving. Kyla, the girl that had originally taken the only child's hand, asked, You want us to go that way and not south? Yes, that way and not straight south, stated Trenton. And his group started walking southwest. Okay, we turned and we're not going straight south. How are you in my head? Oh yes, I'm charmed. Where are you? I need help. We're in the woods somewhere. I've never been this far, so I'm not sure. We have our minds linked now, and I believe you can think to me at any time. I'm going to tell you the words to this charm, and you can cast on people in your group, so you can communicate without talking out loud. We don't know limits, so we divided up the group to cast, but then we cast a few more, so that all the adults and older children have connections to each other and the younger children. After that, I'll get Hushman to get more charms from Bradley. What are charms going to do? I can see not talking, but the dogs will still find us. I'm not sure what the extent is. We just sent magic to a browser so he could help a kingdom escape. I believe they turned invisible. I don't know everything. I'm passing what I know. You be careful with the words and pass them exactly. Otherwise, you might cast a different charm. Okay, sorry. I'm just seeing a lot of smoke from the village, and we keep hearing crashing noises. What's left to tear down? The soldiers burned the houses. Oh, the chimneys. Are you ready? Hang on. I'm going to repeat these words aloud to a few others as you teach me. Trenton called. Moloch, Aldemia, Clary, Martin, Devald, Benton, Marley, and Kyla. And anyone else that wants to. Listen carefully. I'm getting words from Kosher, and he says they need to be exact. We're going to cast charms on each other so we don't have to talk. Then we will learn to be invisible and hopefully non-smellable and small and other things. Not hungry, piped up Sarli, Kyla's younger sister. A few in the group chuckled a little. Well, when we get to the woods, there are berries, stated Trenton. Then they continued walking, and Trenton thought to Kosher that he was ready after he asked if not smellable and small were options. Kosher thought to him that he didn't know all the options. Then he thought a few words at a time, and Trenton repeated them. Hoshman looked around his group. Well, we are stopped, so I'll try to get some more charms from Bradley while we wait for Kosher to give the connection charms. I can't believe all those children are out on their own, stated Sylvie. But we can't turn back, stated Thilda. We have to help this way, through the connection. At least Trenton listened to Kosher, stated Kala. But Kosher said Trenton was already out, said Kempton. They were at the pond already when the dragons came in. If I had been there, I would have been too scared to return. Sylvie laid a hand gently on Kala's arm. I know you care for the people in the village, but you have to let go of what you can't control. Are you sure you want to ride your dragon? Asked Soflin. Maybe he should fly a few times first. Lydia nodded. Okay, I'll let him fly a few times first, while I practice making the saddle. They were in the meadow south of Frauques's cave, and Frauques flapped his wings. Soflin chuckled to herself and thought to herself, I don't know what I was so worried about if he can't even lift into the air yet. Then Frauques flapped some more and lifted up. Soflin raised her eyebrows and opened her eyes very wide. The little baby dragon amused her. Lydia stared intently at her dragon, and her heart filled with love and excitement. She briefly wondered what Libya's dragon looked like. Then she thought if she rode her dragon, then she could fly to her sister. So she turned her gaze back to the saddle and cast the charm to form it. Bradley, thought Hoshman, can you hear me? Oh, I hope this works both ways. Bradley looked up from the bark chips. He thought, yeah, Pa, I hear you. Yeah, Pa? Forget that. You feel distracted. But we need your thoughts here. Several children got out of the village. Kosher is thinking with Trenton. He's giving the charm to connect, but Trenton needs the invisibility. Did you get the word for smell? Is there a charm for small? What charms can we give them? Hold on, Pa. I gave Hector the charm to think. Actually, I gave him the charm for invisibility, too. Isn't Trenton his son? Wouldn't he already know that? Maybe Trenton heard it. But now he has a reason to learn it. Okay, that makes sense. These words need to be precise. Browser was trying to think something to me this morning. It was so important that he wants me to learn to read. Imagine trying to learn to read if you've never seen a letter. Coulter has never seen a letter. We messed up F the first time. But once Broman got it right, we still didn't give F to Coulter. And is there some reason that B has 2 circles, but D has 1? Those are Coulter's questions. He asked also why G had a line in it, but C doesn't. Of course, he doesn't say the names of the letters. He asked this one or that one. Bradley, focus on this conversation. I thought I was, thought Bradley. The words need to be precise, and probably we shouldn't teach too many at once. Like I was saying, Coulter mixes up B and D, and C and G. Sorry, son. I just feel so helpless right now. We have 2 linkers with us, so we can't turn back. 2 linkers? Thought Bradley. Kala and Kosher? I didn't get vibrations from them. I got bubbles or something, like when you breathe in or smell mint, not the body shaking like I did with the other linkers. I don't know, son. This is the first I'm learning of how you knew. Bradley stopped short. He glanced around at Broman and Coulter. What's wrong, Broman? He asked. I smell smoke. And look, I see it, said Broman as he pointed. Bradley looked up and saw gray clouds, dark gray clouds above the trees, and he also smelled the smoke smell. He could feel the wind through the trees and thought the wind was blowing the smoke towards them. We go east, thought Hagar. I follow son now. Broman nodded his head absent-mindedly. Yeah, go. We're right behind you. Broman put his knife in his sheath and stuffed his bark chips in his bundle. Bradley had stitched the rope on in a few places, taught him how to put the bundle on his back. Bradley had taken a thin vine and stitched it on Coulter's bundle, too. Broman put his bundle on his back and then motioned to Coulter. Follow my dragon. Come, Bradley. Bradley slung Coulter's bundle on his back and followed after Broman. He glanced back over his shoulder a few times. Bradley received. I need the words to the charms. We'll give them as we're able. Bradley thought, we're too close to the village. We're heading east. Then he thought the words to the charms as he said them in his mind over his group. In the charm, he just inserted the words for and injury and smell at the end, so that they would have protection from all three things. When Broman couldn't see Coulter, he glanced back and couldn't see Bradley either. He accidentally bumped into Coulter, and then he took his hand and pulled him along. He could still make out where his dragon was when the dragon passed a bush and brushed it because the bush would shake. So Broman watched the bushes and continued on. Coulter was scared when he couldn't see the dragon, but when Broman grabbed his hand, he walked without protesting. Hagar didn't notice he was invisible. He just followed the sun. Bradley could see the bushes move too, but he focused more on the vibrations he felt. Hoshman looked at Kosher. Ask Trenton if his pa Hector gave him any words. Bradley says he should have the charms for thinking and invisibility already. If so, we can add the words for protection against injury and smell. Small. Does Bradley know the words for small? Asked Kosher. Trenton wanted the words for small. I'll ask. You see what Trenton knows. Trenton received. Do you know any of those words already? Bradley gave some of them to your pa, Hector. Yeah, some of them sounded familiar, but not exactly. Just tell us again, and I'll repeat them again. Even Jovel is repeating words, and there are a lot of words. So a fewer at a time, please. So Kosher repeated the words for the connection. Then he got words from Hoshman for protection from sight, injury, and smell, and how to spread it to others, which Bradley learned from Browser when he was spreading his charm over the kingdom. Then Kosher had Trenton practice and said he would think back in a few minutes with small if they still wanted that. That's a lot at once, thought Trenton, but I can't see my group. I think this will be good enough for now. Well, if we're small, like dust, do you think we will blow around in the wind? Maybe we don't want to be small. The wind was blowing smoke to us. Now it's blowing the other way. Kosher would see if he could find out, and thought that he would check back in near dusk. Trenton had everyone grab hands, especially once the little ones started to cry when they couldn't see anyone. Older siblings had been able to cast the charms over younger ones. The older ones would glance back over their shoulders several times, but they felt much better invisible and would worry if the dogs could smell them when they heard the dogs. Hoshman thought back with Bradley to see if he knew about small, and Bradley explained about percent. Hoshman remembered percent and how to calculate it, so he asked about the wind blowing them around if they were small. Bradley didn't know, but thought that would be likely. Libya finally woke up, and Keechan immediately told her about the berry bushes. Libya didn't really know how to tell time in a vision, so she went to eat the berries. Baldian thought to Elloni, we don't want to be late to stop the sister. No, we don't. But knowledge with them, he says, we didn't see her sister die. And the knowledge says things will happen the way they are supposed to happen if you're open to the universe. I'm trying not to worry, and I will see what happens. Baldian nodded her head and followed after Libya to the berry bushes. She thought she might try to eat a berry to see what they were like. Libya picked several berries and ate them. Bitsy came off of Elloni's scale where she had attached herself. "Oh, I've not fed you enough." Libya looked over at Bitsy and Hazor. "You're very generous," thought Libya. "But you were hungry," thought Bitsy. "I had my meat," thought Libya. "Don't worry. I'm going to harvest more than I need, and I'm going to shrink them like the tailors taught me to do, and then I'm going to share them with my sister." Elloni realized that Bitsy and Hazor had attached, and she realized that Felicity assigned them to stay with them always. She hadn't really thought of them when she lifted into the air, but she needed to be more cognizant of them in the future. Then she looked at Baldian and saw another tailor separate from Baldian's scale and take the tailor form. She wasn't sure what the tailor's name was. Baldian tried to grab a mouthful of berries, but she got berries, leaves, and thorns, and decided she didn't like the thorns, but she dutifully chewed and didn't waste her bite, not knowing that the raw material could compost back into the ground. She just knew that the tailors didn't like to waste things. Soon Libya was fastening the saddle on Elloni, and they were flying in the direction she thought her sister would be. Hector and Charmin helped the children and adults and each other out. The woods weren't too far away, and the soldiers had passed them and were already closer to the homes in the village. Still, they ran in a crouch to the woods, and Charmin already told his daughter to be quiet and close her eyes. He didn't want her to see the dragons and be afraid. If she let out a noise, that would give them all away. They made it to the woods, and then the group turned back to look in the village. They saw the dragons swinging their tails and knocking over chimneys. The soldiers didn't go down in the cellars yet. They would wait until the dogs arrived and send them in first. Hector and Charmin motioned their group south. They didn't know if the soldiers with the dogs were coming or not, but they assumed the dogs were coming. Hector whispered to them, "Say the words I told you yesterday, or the day before. Not the ones for the mind. Let's do the invisible charm." Vixie, who was Aldimia's and Talta's mother, whispered, "I knew some of those words as a child because my grandmother and mother would say them. Oyoste was sight, and olfaste was smell. I'm trying to remember taste, hear, and feel, but I think we should add ta olfaste to the end of the words you told us, and when I remember the other words, especially here, I will let you know." There were nods passed around, and without knowing the words to include the children, they had the intentions of including the children, so the charms worked as they expected. Before they moved too far away, they saw the parents of the two boys they had, so they motioned to them, but they couldn't see their own arms. "I'll get them," whispered Hector. He went back and grabbed the couple. Both the husband and wife jumped. Hector whispered to them to say the words he told them before, and he repeated the words to them, adding the new words. They said the words, and Hector guided them to his group, who were waiting on them to arrive. Since they saw the couple blink out of sight, they knew things were working. Once the group to the group, the couple whispered that they tried to get the rest of them to come, but they were afraid of the dogs finding them. Charmin thought they should grab hands, but admitted his hands were full, so Vixie said she would hold his elbow. Once they linked up, they headed south, and only a couple of times did they glance back. Unknowingly, they went southwest because they wanted to be farther away from the village. Libya had her mind on riding Elloni, and she didn't really know how to gauge distance, so she was just paying attention to holding on. Then, in the distance, she saw something flying in the sky, and it seemed too big to be a bird. She pointed and thought, There, that must be my sister. Elloni thought. Yes, I see her and her dragon. Hold tight. I'm going to speed up a bit so we can get closer. Maybe if you think with her like you do with me and the tailors, you can get her to land. Maybe, thought Libya. Then she felt Elloni go a lot faster, and that scared her. As Elloni flew faster, more information started opening up for her. She suddenly knew maneuvers and how to roll and flip and other such things. She also realized that while the information had opened for her, that didn't mean it had opened for Libya. Lydia was trying to enjoy flying. Her dragon had thought to her many times that flying was fun and she would enjoy it. But early on they hit some turbulence and Fracas had dropped quite a way down. Lydia was trying to concentrate on the charm for the saddle, but the drop had frightened her badly. Soflin was down on the ground and she had covered her mouth with her hands when they dropped, but she was delighted as Fracas pulled up higher once again. Then Fracas tipped his left wing down to circle back, and that's when he felt the saddle sliding off him. He immediately straightened, but the saddle kept sliding. Elloni dove in faster, and Libya was scared. She saw her sister falling, just like in the vision. She held onto the saddle real tightly with her left hand. She leaned down with her right hand. Libya called out to her sister, "Lydia, take my hand!" Elloni had picked the perfect path, and Libya was in line to grab her sister, and their arms latched. But the falling weight was not something Libya had expected. Libya's saddle slipped a little to the side, but then it held. Elloni circled closer to the ground. "You will have to drop her once we get closer to the ground. Your saddle is loose, so I need to land." Fracas circled above them. He was glad that his linker was safe, and he stayed out of the way of Elloni. Once Lydia's feet were slightly above Soflin's head, Libya said, "I'm going to drop you, but we're not too high." She saw fear on Lydia's face. "It's just like jumping out of the tree. My saddle isn't tight enough and it's sliding. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lydia was scared, but she let go of Libya and fell to the ground. The ground was hard, but Lydia was okay. Elloni landed, and Libya slid off. The saddle slid down with her and hung on the underside of Elloni. Baldian and Fracas landed, and the group gathered. Soflin and Libya were asking Lydia over and over if she was okay. Fracas thought, "I'm really sorry. You're not supposed to fall. Flying's supposed to be fun." "It's not your fault," Fracas stated Soflin. "I shouldn't have let her ride with a charm. I should have made her wait for a real saddle." She looked at Lydia. "I'm sorry, dear. I got caught up in the excitement, and I shouldn't have." "I'm not hurt, thanks to my sister, and you keep telling me not to be sorry about everything," stated Lydia. Lydia. That is wrong. Oh, and I still got to change it in the book. Sorry about that. But you haven't put me in danger, stated Soflin. The twins introduced their dragons and Soflin to each other, and then they stood in silence for a few moments. Libya knew she needed to get back to her lessons, but she didn't want to just leave her sister. Then she remembered Keechan, and she pulled her out of her pocket and introduced her. "Oh, I have an idea," exclaimed Libya. Then she thought, "I have an idea, and I'm sorry I keep talking out loud. The tailor shrunk Cremina to bring her to me. I can, Soflin chuckled. "I know some charms, so I can shrink us, the three of us, and you can put us in your pocket. I really need to speak with the tailors anyway, and I'm okay with talking out loud. I understand we need to practice thinking with each other, but it's almost like..." Soflin paused. "Do you have..." "I fly," thought in Farkas. "I no go in pocket." Soflin glanced at the dragon, and then she looked back at Libya. For a brief second, she looked at Lydia and compared the twins. She didn't think she could tell them apart yet. Maybe in a few days. Do you have a charm cast on us, Libya? Or do you just think in your head and think who you want to receive the thoughts? Libya looked around. She looked at Elloni. There are words for a charm in my head, but I haven't used those. Do I need to use those? She looked at Soflin. You've gotten my thoughts? Yes, dear, I have, replied Soflin. Baldian thought in. Remember, Elloni is supposed to lead us dragons in our fight. So that makes you a leader, too. We were reading something about charms to cast. Libya looked at Baldian and she sighed. Sometimes I don't get meaning when I read till the second or third time because I'm so busy trying to pronounce things. Please show me where to read when we get back to the tailor's. Baldian nodded her head. I suspect that if you haven't cast a charm and we're getting your thoughts, then maybe you only have to cast on us when we're apart, stated Soflin. Soflin curtsied and slightly bowed her head. You are our new leader, and I'm delighted to be of service. Lydia looked up at Soflin, and then she looked at her sister. Libya's mouth hung open, and her eyes were wide, and Libya didn't know what to say. So Lydia said, Pa always said you were special, she said. But at the mention of her father, she remembered the last time that she saw him, and she flinched with sadness and guilt. Soflin studied her and the pictures in the air around her. We will have to work on your ill-placed guilt, because nothing that happened in your village was your fault. I will teach you to place blame where it goes. And in this case, blame goes fully on King Damontade's soldiers. Soflin glanced around and cast the charm to shrink herself and Lydia. Then the group arranged everything after Libya adjusted and tightened the saddle so she wouldn't fall, and then they lifted off. Elloni thought about heading straight to the tailor's, but she remembered Felicity not wanting them too close to King Damontade's kingdom, and with seeing the pictures that surrounded Libya's sister, she was much in agreement. So she headed west to the berry bushes. They would stop there and check on everyone, and then they would head to the tailor's. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 18. I found 3 or more errors, at least. She said at the beginning and the end of one sentence, and one sentence didn't flow right. It had them in there twice. So, like I said, this is a rough draft, and it needs edits, and I will have to fix it. So hopefully I can find those when I go back to read, because even though I fixed the one name while I was reading, and I shouldn't have really done that, but I did. Couldn't help myself. I fixed it in the script and not in the book. So it's still an error in the book. Anyway, leave a comment on if you were Trenton. Would you have told the children with you to cross the pond and not go back to the village? What would you think if you suddenly had cautious thoughts in your head? Would you think that your fear had suddenly overwhelmed you? Or leave a comment on if you were Lydia and you hit some turbulence. Now, this is the first time she's flying, you know. And Soflin had shown her pictures of what it would look like, but Soflin probably didn't show her turbulence. So she was flying on her dragon. She hit some turbulence. So leave a comment on if you had been Lydia, would you have been so scared when you hit the turbulence? Would you forget to hold the whole charm for the saddle? Lots of stuff. You can leave other comments if you so desire, but I try to suggest things to help you with your comments. We are coming close to the end of this book, and I will give you a spoiler alert. There will not be a big battle here in book 1. We've had a lot of action. King Damontade's coming. He's killed people. He's burned homes. So we've had a lot of action, but at this point, the Linkers and their dragons are not strong enough to fight King Damantade. So there's not going to be a big battle here. Big battle is at the end of book 3. Now we have 2 more chapters, and then I will give a plot for book 2. If you decide you don't want 3 books, you can add the next plot to the end of the first one, and then when I give you the 3rd one, you can add that so you have a complete story. Because I've kind of broken the story up into 3 books, because I just put in a lot of stuff and a lot of action. It's kind of how I see it. So if you want a smaller story, or you only want 50,000 words for the whole story, then you can add it to just 1 book. My genre is supposed to be 80,000 to 120,000 words. It's not really a novel, but it's a fantasy adventure. So whatever you feel is right for you, whatever you see, whatever adventure you want to take, that is your fun. So that's not for me to dictate to you. But we're writing on the same plot so that we can kind of journey together. Join me Tuesday for us to write part 3 of a story that started with a setting and maybe a little jargon. Join me Friday for chapter 19 of Elloni's Pride, book 1, Breaking Point. Visit my website, bymckella.com, and read some character bios. If you read some, then leave a comment on which ones you've read or your favorites ones that you've read. I hope to start adding more bios to the website as well. I haven't been so good about doing that. Things tend to happen on the weekend. But that's for me to worry about. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. And other people will have a higher chance of finding this video in this channel if you do those things. Thank you for joining me today. I really, really, really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mckella with Write with Mckella. Bye for now.